the silence behind his smile. The world knew Keanu Reeves as the calm man who smiled through storms. But no one really knew what lived behind that smile. On screen, he was the hero who saved the world. Off-screen, he was quiet, polite, and distant. People admired his kindness, yet few understood the sadness that shaped it. It all began many years ago, before Hollywood lights and fame. Keanu had met a woman who changed the rhythm of his life. Her name was Claire. She wasn't from the film world. She wasn't a celebrity. She was an artist who believed that love was not about words, but presence. She painted to feel alive, and Keanu found peace watching her work. They met on a rainy afternoon in a small art studio in Toronto. Keanu had entered to escape the cold, and she had smiled without looking up, her hands covered in blue paint. That small smile stayed with him for years. Over time, they became inseparable. She helped him rediscover silence. When he was tired from auditions and rejection, she simply listened. She never told him what to do. She just held his hand, and he understood everything without a word. But fame came like a wave, unstoppable and demanding. After The Matrix, everyone wanted him. Interviews, red carpets, flashing lights. And somewhere between fame and fatigue, Keanu began to lose the calm that Claire had given him. She didn't complain. She just watched him drift into the world's noise. One evening, as he sat with her on the balcony, she said softly, "You're learning to live for others again, but don't forget how to live for yourself." He didn't answer. His heart wanted to stay, but his world was pulling him away. Then one morning, she was gone. Not forever, but far enough to make his world stop. Claire had been in an accident on her way to deliver one of her paintings. Keanu rushed to the hospital, trembling, hoping she would open her eyes again. For days he stayed beside her bed, whispering stories, reading poems, refusing to sleep. The doctors tried their best, but the silence in that room became unbearable. When she passed, he didn't cry in public. He didn't talk about her. He went back to sets, smiled for cameras, and buried his pain beneath gentle kindness. The world praised his humility, called him the most down-to-earth actor. No one saw that humility was born from heartbreak. Years passed, but Claire's memory stayed like sunlight behind clouds. And deep down, Keanu made a silent promise he would never let the world know about her. Because their love was his last sacred thing, untouched by fame. He donated in her name. He built quiet spaces in hospitals for families waiting like he once did. He helped others without explaining why. People called him mysterious. But the truth was simple. He was protecting love that the world could never understand. Yet destiny was not done with him. One day, while filming in a distant town, he saw a painting hanging on a cafe wall. It had the same brush strokes, the same calm blue light that only Claire used. Below it, a small note said, "For the one who never stopped believing." His heart froze. He asked the owner about it. The man said the painting was sold years ago by an artist who vanished after tragedy. She said it belonged to someone who would find it when he was ready. Keanu stood there for a long time, staring at the colors, the memories, the message. And for the first time in years, his smile broke. That night, under the same stars he once watched with Claire, he whispered, "I never stopped, Claire. I just hid it from the world." But what he didn't know was that someone had been listening, someone who would soon change everything, someone who would make him face the love he tried so hard to hide, and that was only the beginning. The stranger who knew too much the next morning. Keanu walked through the quiet streets of the small town where he was filming. He wore a black jacket, cap pulled low, trying to disappear like always. But his mind was not on the movie anymore. It was on that painting. The colors, the message, the feeling that someone still remembered. He returned to the cafe, hoping to see the painting again, but it was gone. The owner said a young woman had bought it early in the morning. Keanu's heart sank. He wanted to ask more, but something in his chest stopped him. Maybe it was fate telling him to let go, but destiny didn't believe in letting go so easily. That evening, as he sat on the set waiting for his next scene, a woman walked by holding a folder. She wasn't part of the crew. She had long dark hair tied back, and her eyes looked calm yet searching. She stopped for a second and looked directly at him. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, "I think this belongs to you." She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a folded note written in familiar handwriting. His breath caught. It was Claire's writing. "If he ever finds this, tell him the blue still shines." Keanu stared at the words, his fingers trembling. He looked up, but the woman was already walking away. He called out, "Wait!" She turned, her expression gentle but unreadable. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who promised to keep her memory alive," she said. "My name is Elena." She told him she was Claire's cousin. After the accident, she had collected Claire's paintings and letters, keeping them safe. Claire had written messages she never had the chance to send. One of them was the note Keanu now held. Elena explained that Claire always believed Keanu would find peace only when he stopped running from love. "She used to say you carry too much light for one heart," Elena said. "But light can't live in hiding forever." Those words pierced him. He had spent years helping strangers, giving silently, smiling for others. But deep inside, he had built walls so high that no one could reach his real heart. They met again the next day. Keanu invited Elena to the cafe, the same one where he'd seen the painting. She brought a box filled with Claire's sketches. As he looked through them, memories came rushing back. The first painting she sold. The unfinished canvas she once promised to complete. One of the sketches showed a man sitting alone on a park bench, feeding birds. Beneath it, Claire had written, "He will never know how much kindness saved me." He couldn't breathe for a moment. Tears filled his eyes, quiet and real. Elena looked at him, unsure if she had done the right thing. But Keanu nodded slowly. "Thank you," he whispered. "She never told me this." Elena smiled faintly. "She didn't have to. She believed you already knew." After that day, Keanu started walking every evening to the same lake Claire once loved painting. He sat in silence, watching reflections of clouds move across the water. But something inside him was changing. For years, he had hidden his heart under kindness. Now it was opening again, not for fame, not for love in return, but for truth. A week later, Elena returned to say goodbye. She was leaving for Italy to hold an exhibition of Claire's final artworks. She invited him to come. Keanu hesitated. Crowds, speeches, photographers. Those were the things he avoided. But Elena said quietly, "This isn't for them. This is for her. For you." He promised to think about it. But that night he couldn't sleep. He took out the note again. "The blue still shines." The words seemed alive, calling him back to a part of himself he had forgotten. By dawn, he made his choice. The next scene of his movie would be shot in Rome, just an hour away from where the exhibition would be held. Fate had decided for him, but when he arrived in Italy, he would discover something he could never have imagined. A truth about Claire that had been hidden even from him, and it would test every part of the kindness he had built his life on. The truth she left behind Rome was alive with golden sunlight and ancient whispers. As Keanu's car rolled through narrow streets lined with old stone walls, he felt something strange inside him. Not excitement, not fear, but a quiet pull from the past. The art exhibition was held in a small gallery near the Tiber River. Banners outside read, "The blue still shines, the works of Claire Marlowe." Her name alone was enough to make his heart tremble. He took a deep breath before stepping inside. The gallery was silent except for soft piano music. Visitors moved slowly, admiring the paintings. Every wall carried a piece of Claire's soul. Calm skies, fading sunsets, and faces half hidden in shadow. Her art always carried emotion too deep for words. Elena met him near the entrance. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "Neither was I," he replied quietly. She led him through the gallery until they reached a small room at the end. It was dimly lit, and in the center stood a single painting covered by white cloth. "This one," she said, "was never shown to anyone. Claire finished it a week before the accident." Keanu's throat tightened. He hesitated, then slowly lifted the cloth. The painting showed two figures, a man and a woman sitting beside each other under a blue sky. The man's face was unmistakable. It was him. The woman leaned gently on his shoulder, eyes closed, a soft smile on her lips. But behind them, faintly painted, was a broken clock, its hands frozen in time. Beneath the image, Claire had written, Love survives the silence we choose. Keanu stared at it, frozen. It felt like Claire had painted his soul. The love he buried, the time he lost, the silence he chose. He whispered, "She knew." Elena nodded. "She always knew you loved her. She also knew you would never say it aloud. She used to tell me, 'He's afraid of what love takes away, not what it gives.'" He turned to her. "What did she mean?" Elena sighed softly. "Claire once lost someone before she met you. She never told you because she wanted to protect you from her pain. She believed love is not about sharing wounds, but healing them quietly." For a moment, Keanu felt the room spinning. All those nights he thought she was distant, all those moments she went silent. They weren't because she was cold, but because she carried her own grief. And she still chose to love him anyway. His eyes filled with tears. "She healed me while she was breaking inside," he said. Elena nodded, tears glistening. "And you healed her too. You just never realized it." They stood there in silence, the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. As he left the gallery later that night, Rome's streets glowed with soft yellow lamps. People walked by laughing, music played from a nearby cafe. But Keanu heard only the echo of Claire's voice in his mind. Gentle, forgiving, endless. He sat by the river, watching the reflection of the moon in the water. He took out her note again, tracing the words, "The blue still shines." He finally understood. The blue wasn't just her color. It was the calm after storms, the peace they both searched for. The next morning, he visited Claire's grave outside the city. Elena had arranged it beautifully, surrounded by her favorite flowers, white lilies. Keanu knelt down and placed a small blue pendant that Claire once wore around her neck. "You were right," he whispered. "Love doesn't end when silence begins. I hid it because I thought pain made it weak, but it's still here, stronger than ever." He stayed there until the sun rose over the hills. As he stood up to leave, he noticed a small, folded paper placed beneath a flower vase. It looked recent. He opened it. Inside, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Someone has been waiting to tell you the rest of the story." There was no signature, only an address in Los Angeles. Keanu froze. Who could it be? Claire had no one else, at least not that he knew of, but deep down, he felt a strange mix of fear and hope. He knew one thing: the story of his hidden love wasn't over yet. And in Los Angeles, a truth waited that would change everything he believed about love, loss, and forgiveness. The letter that changed everything, the flight to Los Angeles, felt longer than ever. Keanu stared out the window, watching the clouds drift like slow memories. The note with the address lay in his hand. He had read it 100 times, searching for meaning between the words. Someone has been waiting to tell you the rest of the story. As soon as he landed, he didn't go home. He drove straight to the address. It was a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Old houses, tall trees, and the soft sound of wind moving through leaves. The address led to a small white house with a blue door. Something about that color made his heart ache again. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again, and after a few moments, the door opened slightly. A woman in her late 30s stood there holding a book. Her eyes were gentle but filled with something heavy, something like unfinished grief. "Are you Keanu Reeves?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes. I was told you wanted to see me." She stepped aside and let him in. The house smelled of fresh flowers and paint, familiar like Claire's old studio. She motioned for him to sit. "My name is Lila," she said. "Claire and I were close friends when she lived here before moving to Toronto." Keanu's eyes widened. "I never knew she lived in Los Angeles before that." Lila smiled sadly. There was a lot she didn't talk about. Not because she wanted to hide it from you, but because she thought it would only bring pain. She walked to a wooden drawer and took out a small box wrapped in faded ribbon. "This was meant for you. She left it here years ago before she met you. She told me that if you ever came looking, I should give it to you myself." Keanu's hands shook as he opened the box. Inside were a few letters, a photograph, and a small envelope marked "Only when he's ready." He opened the first letter. It was written in Claire's handwriting, soft and steady. Dear Keanu, I never expected to meet you when I did. But when I saw you walk into that studio, I felt like I had known you forever. I want you to know something I never said. I wasn't just healing from loss. I was healing from guilt. Years ago, I was in love with someone who was sick. I couldn't save him. I thought love had failed. That's why I was afraid to love again. The letter continued. But you changed that. Your kindness, your quiet strength, your way of seeing good in everyone. You reminded me that love isn't about saving someone. It's about walking beside them, even when they're lost. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want you to carry my sorrow. You already carried enough of your own. Tears slipped down Keanu's face. He read the words again, feeling the weight of her silence turn into understanding. He then opened the small envelope, marked only when he's ready. Inside was a folded page, but this one wasn't a letter. It was a list. All the things Claire had written she wished to do with him. Visit the ocean at night, cook together on a rainy day, dance without music, plant a tree together. And at the end of the list, one last line. And if I ever leave before you, let the tree remind you that love never ends. He closed his eyes and whispered, You kept loving me even when I didn't see it. Leela placed her hand gently on his shoulder. She talked about you often. She said you were her peace. She believed that when you finally came back, you'd be ready to live again, not just survive. Keanu smiled faintly through tears. She was right. I think I'm ready now. Before leaving, Lila gave him one last thing. A folded photograph of Claire standing beside a small tree by the ocean. On the back, she had written, Planted for you. Someday, find it. That night, Keanu sat in his car near the Pacific coast. The sound of waves echoed through the open window. He looked at the picture again, the curve of the cliffs, the distant lighthouse, the same ocean he now faced. He decided to search for the tree. Days turned into nights as he drove along the coast, stopping by different beaches, comparing the view to the photo. Then one morning, he found it. A small oak tree stood near a white lighthouse. The same spot. The same light. He walked toward it slowly, his heart pounding. Beneath the tree was a small wooden sign worn by time. It read, For K, love still grows. He fell to his knees. The sea wind brushed his face as tears ran freely. He whispered, I found it, Claire. I found us. The waves crashed behind him. The sun rose higher, and for the first time in years, his heart felt full. Not broken, not empty, just full. He sat there for hours, watching the ocean, the tree, and the sky, all carrying her colors. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A woman stood near the lighthouse, sketchbook in hand, quietly drawing him and the tree. When their eyes met, she smiled softly. And at that moment, Keanu felt something unexpected, not pain, not loss, but the quiet beginning of something new. Echoes of a promise, the woman stood quietly near the lighthouse, sketchbook balanced in her hands, her hair moving gently in the sea breeze. For a long moment, Keanu didn't move. It felt like time had stopped again, the same way it had years ago when he first met Claire. She closed her sketchbook softly and began to walk toward him. There was something familiar in her presence, not her face, not her voice, but the calm energy she carried. Beautiful morning, she said with a warm smile. Keanu nodded, still trying to find his words. Yes, it's peaceful here. She looked at the tree behind him. That's my favorite spot to draw. I come here every week. Do you know the story behind it? He asked carefully. She nodded. The old lighthouse keeper told me. He said a woman planted that tree for someone she loved. She called it her promise tree. Keanu's throat tightened. Her name was Claire. The woman's eyes softened. Yes, Claire Marlowe. I've studied her work for years. She was one of my biggest inspirations. He looked at her, surprised. You knew her art? She smiled gently. I'm an art teacher. I teach children how to paint emotions, not pictures. Claire's philosophy changed how I teach. She believed every color had a memory. Keanu smiled faintly. She used to say that to me too. They both stood there in silence, watching the ocean waves crash softly against the rocks. Finally, she extended her hand. I'm Aria. Keanu, he said, shaking her hand. Aria tilted her head thoughtfully. Reeves, as in Keanu Reeves? He nodded slowly, used to that reaction, but she only smiled. You're quieter in person than I expected. I've had a lot of practice, he replied with a small laugh. They sat down on the bench near the promise tree. Arya opened her sketchbook and turned it toward him. The drawing she had made was breathtaking, the small oak tree, the lighthouse, and him kneeling before it with the sunlight touching his face. You captured the moment, he said softly. Sometimes the world gives you moments you can't ignore, she replied. You looked like you were finding something you'd lost. He nodded. I was. Arya studied his expression. Someone you loved? He hesitated, then said, someone I still love. She didn't ask more. She just sat with him in silence. That silence again. The same kind that once lived between him and Claire, only this time, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like peace. Over the next few days, Keanu kept returning to the lighthouse. Sometimes Arya would already be there, sketching or teaching a small group of children by the shore. She invited him to help one day. He watched as the kids laughed, mixing colors, splashing paint across the canvas. One little girl asked him, "What color is love?" He smiled and said, "It's not one color. It's the mix of every color that stays after the storm." Arya looked at him with quiet admiration. You sound like Claire. He turned to her, surprised. You knew her better than I thought. She shook her head. Not personally. But she wrote to my mother once. My mom was also an artist, and they exchanged letters for years. After Claire passed, my mom kept all of them. She used to tell me Claire's story every night. Keanu's eyes widened. Your mother's name? Lena, she said softly. He froze. Lena had been Claire's closest friend in Los Angeles, the same friend who had introduced her to painting therapy after her first heartbreak. Claire had mentioned her once, long ago, when she said, "A friend saved me when I forgot how to live." Keanu looked at Arya in disbelief. Your mother helped Claire heal. Arya nodded slowly. And Claire helped my mother live again after her illness. They saved each other in ways no one understood. Keanu stared at the ocean, his heart heavy and full all at once. And now you're here. At her promise tree, Arya smiled faintly. Maybe that's how love travels, through kindness, through people, through art. He looked at her, really looked at her this time, not as someone new, but as a reflection of the same love that had shaped his life. Her eyes held the same quiet strength, the same patience Claire once had. That evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean, Arya handed him a small envelope. My mother asked me to give this to someone if I ever met the man Claire wrote about. I think it's you. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a note written in Claire's handwriting, the last one he would ever receive. If you're reading this, it means you've found peace. I told Lena once that love never dies. It just changes its form. When you find someone who reminds you of warmth, of gentleness, of truth, don't run. That's love finding you again? Keanu folded the note carefully, his eyes filled with tears. He looked at Arya, who stood quietly beside the promise tree, the evening sun lighting her face. He whispered, "She was right again." Arya smiled. She usually was. They stood together, watching the horizon fade into gold. For the first time in years, Keanu didn't feel alone. He felt connected to Claire, to her memory, to the new chapter life was offering. But deep down, he also knew that love, no matter how peaceful, always comes with a test, and soon that test would arrive, one that would decide whether he truly learned to stop hiding his heart. Love that never ends, the days turned to weeks, and Keanu found himself returning again and again to the small coastal town where the promise tree stood. It became his quiet sanctuary, a place where he could finally breathe without the weight of the past pressing against his heart. Arya was always there too, her sketchbook never far from her hands. She painted the sea, the sky, and sometimes him. They didn't speak much at first. Their comfort was found in silence, the same kind of silence that once bound him and Claire together, only softer now. One day, as they sat by the water, Arya asked gently, "Did you ever tell her you loved her?" He looked down, his eyes distant. "No, I thought love didn't need words. I was wrong. She nodded, not judging, not pressing. Sometimes silence protects us, but sometimes it hides what should be heard. He smiled sadly. I'm learning that now, for the first time in many years. Keanu began to share stories he had never told anyone. The laughter, the pain, the quiet nights of filming where he would stare into the dark and think of Claire. Arya listened without interruption. Her presence reminded him of something Claire had written. He will find peace in the reflection of kindness. One morning, as they walked near the lighthouse, the weather suddenly turned. The sky darkened, waves crashed harder, and strong wind swept through the shore. Children who had come for art class ran back toward their parents. Arya turned to help one of them pick up her sketchbook that had flown near the cliff edge. In that moment, Keanu's heart stopped. The cliff was slippery from rain. He shouted, "Arya, wait!" But she had already taken a step too far. The rock beneath her foot broke loose. Keanu ran, his heart pounding, grabbing her arm just in time before she slipped over the edge. For a few seconds, neither moved. She was trembling, eyes wide, clutching his hand tightly. He pulled her back to safety, holding her close. Rain poured over them both. She was shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper. "You could have fallen," he whispered, breathless. She looked up at him, her voice shaking. "You risked yourself for me, because I couldn't lose another light," he said softly. They stood there, soaked, their eyes locked. And in that fragile, rain-soaked moment, something shifted. Not to replace what he had lost, but to honor it. He felt Claire's presence in the wind, gentle and approving. Later that night, they sat by the lighthouse fire, wrapped in blankets. Arya looked at him quietly. "You still love her, don't you?" He nodded. "I always will." "Then why do you look at me like that?" she asked softly. Keanu hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Because love doesn't end when someone leaves. It grows into the people we meet, the moments we share, the hearts that remind us how to live again. You don't replace her, Arya. You continue her story." Tears filled her eyes. "She must have loved you deeply." He smiled faintly. "She taught me that love isn't about forever. It's about leaving someone better than you found them. She did that for me." Arya reached out and took his hand. "And now you're doing that for me." They sat together in silence, the sound of waves blending with the rhythm of their hearts. It wasn't the beginning of a romance filled with promises or dreams. It was something purer, a connection born from shared kindness, shared loss, and shared hope. Months later, Keanu planted another tree beside Claire's promise tree. Smaller, younger, but strong. On the wooden sign beneath it, he carved the words, "For love that never ends." Arya stood beside him, holding her sketchbook open to a fresh page. She drew the two trees standing side by side, roots intertwined beneath the earth. Keanu smiled softly. "You'll keep painting?" She nodded. "Always. And you'll keep living?" He looked at the horizon. "For both of them, her and me." The sun began to rise, casting golden light across the sea. Keanu closed his eyes, feeling warmth spread through him. Not the fire of grief, but the calm of understanding. He finally knew why he had hidden his love all those years. It wasn't fear of loss. It was fear of living again. And now, he wasn't afraid anymore. As the morning breeze carried the scent of salt and lilies, Keanu whispered one last time toward the sea. "Thank you, Claire, for teaching me how to love and how to let go." Arya slipped her hand into his. They stood together beneath the two trees, watching the sun rise higher, two souls connected not by what they had lost, but by what they had found, the courage to keep loving. Even after goodbye, the blue still shined. Not just in the sky, not just in the sea, but in both of their hearts. And that was how Keanu's hidden love became his greatest truth. And so Keanu learned that true love never really disappears. It just changes its shape and waits quietly for us to find it again.